September 19th, 1944. Somewhere in the German forest near Münsterbusch, 3 miles from the Belgian border. The temperature inside the M4 Sherman tank is 137 degrees Fahrenheit, which is hot enough to make you dizzy, hot enough to make your vision blur, hot enough that the metal surfaces inside the turret will burn your skin if you touch them. But that's not the problem. The problem is that the temperature outside the tank is higher. The problem is that something went wrong 6 hours ago, something that shouldn't be possible, something that every tank commander in the European theater has been trained to avoid at all costs. And now Staff Sergeant Lafayette Poole is trapped inside a metal box that's slowly cooking him alive. He can smell burning rubber. He can hear ammunition starting to pop in the storage racks. And through the narrow vision slit in front of his face, he can see 3 German Panther tanks moving into position, their 75mm guns swiveling toward him. And Poole knows that if he opens the hatch and tries to bail out, those guns will cut him in half before his boots hit the ground. So he stays inside. He stays inside because there's a principle in armored warfare that nobody talks about. A principle that separates the tank commanders who survive from the ones who die screaming in burning hulls. And that principle is this: the moment you bail out, you lose. You lose the tank. You lose the position. You lose the fight. And Lafayette Poole has spent 81 days in France, Belgium, and Germany, learning how to fight from inside a Sherman tank. And in those 81 days, he's destroyed more enemy vehicles than any other tank commander in American history. And he's not about to lose now. Not because of fire, not because of heat, not because of anything the Germans can throw at him. But this is getting ahead of our story because to understand what happened in that forest on September 19th, 1944, you first need to understand the problem that Lafayette Poole is trying to solve, and why, in the autumn of 1944, the United States Army is losing the tank war in Europe. The M4 Sherman tank is a death trap. That's not propaganda. That's not German psychological warfare. That's just mathematics. The Sherman weighs 30 tons and has 2 inches of frontal armor, which sounds impressive until you realize that the German Panther weighs 45 tons and has 4 inches of frontal armor. And the Tiger weighs 56 tons and has 5 inches of frontal armor. And both of those tanks carry guns that can punch through a Sherman's armor from 1,500 yards away. The Sherman's 75mm gun, by contrast, can only penetrate a Panther's armor from 300 yards, and only if you hit it in exactly the right spot. Which means that in a straight-up fight between a Sherman and a Panther, the Panther wins 100% of the time. The U.S. Army knows this. They've known it since Normandy, when the first Shermans rolled off the landing craft and got shredded by German tanks that were sitting hull down on ridges, shooting from positions where the Americans couldn't even see them. The problem is that the United States is fighting a war of logistics, not technology. The Sherman is cheap. The Sherman is reliable. The Sherman can be built in factories in Detroit and shipped across the Atlantic by the thousands. And that's the strategy. Overwhelm the Germans with numbers. Send 5 Shermans against 1 Panther, except that 3 of those Shermans are going to burn, and hope that the other 2 can get close enough to land a kill shot. It's brutal. It's cynical. And it works. As long as you're willing to accept that the average lifespan of a Sherman crew in combat is about 3 weeks. Lafayette Poole has been in combat for 81 days. That's not 3 weeks. That's almost 3 months. And in those 81 days, Poole has gone through 3 different Sherman tanks, all of them named in the mood after the Glenn Miller song. And every single one of them has been shot out from under him. The first, In the Mood, took a Panzer Faust to the turret in July. The second, In the Mood, caught fire after a friendly P-38 Lightning mistook it for a German tank and strafed it. And the third, in the mood, the one Poole is driving now, has been hit twice already today, and it's only 9 a.m. But here's the thing that nobody at battalion headquarters understands. Lafayette Poole doesn't lose tanks because he's unlucky. He loses tanks because he gets closer to the enemy than anyone else is willing to go. He loses tanks because he's figured out that the only way to beat a Panther with a Sherman is to close the range to 300 yards, which means driving straight at the enemy through open ground while they're shooting at you. And most tank commanders would rather die than try that. But Poole has tried it 83 times in the past 81 days, and he's still alive. And every German tank crew in the 3rd Armored Division sector knows his name, or at least they know the name painted on the side of his tank. And when they see "In the Mood" rolling toward them through the smoke and the trees, they know they're in trouble. Lafayette Green Poole was born on July 23, 1919, in Odom, Texas, a town so small it doesn't appear on most maps. His father was a farmer. His mother died when Lafayette was 12. And by the time Poole turned 18, he decided that if he stayed in Odom, he'd spend the rest of his life picking cotton and dying slowly of heat stroke. So he joined the Army in 1940, 2 years before Pearl Harbor, and he asked for the cavalry because he liked horses. The recruiter told him the cavalry didn't use horses anymore. They used tanks. Poole said that was fine. A tank was just a steel horse anyway. By June 1944, Poole was a staff sergeant in Company 1, 32nd Armored Regiment, 3rd Armored Division, and he was in command of a Sherman tank with a crew of 5 men: a driver, a bow gunner, a loader, a gunner, and Poole himself in the commander's position. The crew called him War Daddy, a nickname that stuck because Poole treated his men like a father treats his sons. He drilled them until they could load and fire the 75mm gun in 12 seconds. He taught them how to read terrain, how to spot camouflaged positions, how to stay calm when shells were screaming past the turret. And most importantly, he taught them that the gun never stops firing. If you're scared, you keep shooting. If you're wounded, you keep shooting. If the tank is on fire, you keep shooting. Because the moment you stop shooting is the moment the Germans win. Poole's first engagement was on June 27, 1944, 3 weeks after D-Day. His platoon was ordered to take a village called Les Forges, and as In the Mood rolled through the narrow streets, a German soldier stepped out of a doorway and fired a Panzerfaust at point-blank range. The rocket hit the turret, blew a hole the size of a dinner plate through the armor, and filled the crew compartment with white-hot shrapnel. Poole's gunners screamed. The driver was bleeding from his ears, and Poole, who had a piece of metal the size of a pencil embedded in his shoulder, grabbed the gunner's controls and started firing the 75mm gun manually, putting rounds through windows, through walls, through anything that looked like it might be hiding Germans. The Panzerfaust team tried to reload. Poole's 75mm round hit them before they could fire again. The tank was wrecked, but the crew survived. And when they climbed out of the smoking hull, Poole looked at his men and said, "Get me another tank." That set the tone for the next 81 days. Poole would take a tank into combat, fight until it was destroyed, then climb into a new tank and keep fighting. He never took leave. He never rotated to the rear. He just kept rolling forward, and by September 1944, the tally painted on the side of In the Mood 3 showed 12 German tanks destroyed and 246 armored vehicles knocked out, which was more than any other tank commander in the U.S. Army. And Poole wasn't done yet. September 19, 1944, starts badly. Pool's platoon is ordered to probe the German defensive line near Münsterbusch, which is code for drive forward until someone shoots at you, then call in artillery. It's a suicide mission, the kind of order that gets tank crews killed. But Pool has survived worse. So he loads up in the Mood 3, briefs his crew, and rolls out at dawn. The forest is thick. Visibility is maybe 50 yards. The ground is soft from rain, and the Sherman's tracks churn mud as Pool navigates between the trees, eyes scanning for movement, for muzzle flashes, for anything that looks like a firing position. At 8:15 a.m., a German 88mm anti-tank gun opens fire from a concealed position. The first round misses. The second round hits in the Mood 3 square in the front glacis plate, and the impact is like getting hit by a freight train. The tank lurches. The crew is thrown against their seats, and then something inside the engine compartment catches fire. It's not a catastrophic fire, not yet. It's just a small blaze, maybe the size of a campfire, somewhere in the fuel lines or the electrical system. But fires in tanks don't stay small. Gasoline burns at 1800 degrees Fahrenheit. Ammunition cooks off at 300 degrees. And once a Sherman starts burning, you have maybe 30 seconds to bail out before the whole thing turns into a blast furnace. Pool's driver yells, "We're on fire!" Pool yells back, "I know, keep driving." Because here's the thing that Pool has figured out over 81 days of combat. If you bail out of a burning tank in the middle of enemy territory, you're dead. The Germans will shoot you as you climb out of the hatch. Or they'll capture you and send you to a POW camp. Or you'll survive the fire only to die from exposure, from infection, from starvation, because the front lines are fluid and nobody knows where the safe zones are anymore. So Pool makes a decision that defies every instinct, every regulation, every piece of common sense. He's going to stay in the burning tank and keep fighting. For the next 6 hours, Lafayette Pool fights from inside in the Mood 3, while the fire slowly spreads through the engine compartment. The crew can feel the heat through the bulkhead. They can smell burning oil and melting rubber. The loader keeps asking if they should bail out, and Pool keeps saying no, because they're not done yet. At 9:30 a.m., a German Panther appears through the trees, and Pool's gunner puts 2 rounds into its side armor before it can traverse its main gun. The Panther explodes. At 11 a.m., 2 more Panthers try to flank in the Mood 3, and Pool maneuvers through a creek bed to get a better angle, putting rounds through their engine decks until both tanks are burning. By noon, the fire inside in the Mood 3 has spread to the ammunition racks, and rounds are starting to cook off, popping like firecrackers, filling the crew compartment with smoke, and Pool's crew is begging him to bail out. But Pool says no, because he's spotted another Panther, and this one is moving into position to fire on American infantry. And if Pool bails out now, those infantrymen are going to die. So he stays. He stays because the gun still works. He stays because the engine still works. He stays because as long as he can see a target and as long as his gunner can pull the trigger, in the Mood 3 is still a weapon, and Lafayette Pool is still in the fight. At 2 p.m., a radio call comes in from battalion headquarters. They've been monitoring Pool's frequency, listening to him call out targets, listening to his crew report the fire spreading, and now a colonel is on the line, and he's ordering Pool to abandon the tank. Pool says, "Negative, sir. We're still effective." The colonel says, "Sergeant, your tank is on fire. Bail out. That's an order." Pool says, "With respect, sir, I've got targets in front of me, and if I bail out, they're going to kill a lot of our boys. I'm staying." The colonel starts to argue, but Pool switches frequencies and goes back to hunting Panthers. This is insubordination. This is grounds for a court-martial. But Poole doesn't care about regulations. He cares about results. And the results speak for themselves. By 3 p.m., Poole has destroyed 8 German armored vehicles, including 4 Panthers, and he's done it all from inside a burning tank that should have been abandoned 6 hours ago. The fire is so bad now that the crew can't touch the metal surfaces inside the turret without getting burned. The driver's compartment is filled with smoke. The loader is coughing so hard he can barely stand. And Poole is still calling out targets, still directing fire, still refusing to quit. At 4:30 p.m., Poole spots 3 more Panthers moving through a clearing. They're hull down, which means only their turrets are exposed. And they're at long range, maybe 900 yards, which is too far for the Sherman's 75mm gun to penetrate. But Poole has been fighting for 81 days, and he's learned a few tricks. He orders his driver to move forward, closing the range to 500 yards, then 400, then 300, and the whole time the Panthers are shooting back. Their 75mm rounds screaming past in the Mood 3, and one of those rounds hits the turret, punching through the armor and killing Poole's gunner instantly. Poole doesn't hesitate. He climbs down into the gunner's seat, covered in blood, and he starts firing manually, putting rounds into the Panthers until all 3 are burning. And then, at exactly 5:15 p.m., 6 hours and 57 minutes after the fire started, Poole finally gave the order to bail out. Not because the fire has gotten worse, not because the tank is out of ammunition, but because there are no more targets. The Germans have retreated. The position is secure, and Lafayette Poole, covered in burns, bleeding from shrapnel wounds, half blind from smoke, climbs out of the hatch and collapses on the ground next to his burning tank. When the medics reach Poole, they find him lying in the mud next to in the Mood 3, which is now fully engulfed in flames, ammunition cooking off in bursts that sound like fireworks. Poole's crew is scattered around the tank, all of them wounded, all of them alive, except for the gunner. And when the medics ask Poole how long he stayed in the tank, Poole says, "Long enough?" The after-action report lists 11 confirmed German vehicle kills for September 19th, 1944. 4 Panther tanks, 3 Stug assault guns, 2 half-tracks, and 2 armored cars. All of them destroyed by a single Sherman tank that was on fire for almost 7 hours. The report doesn't mention that Poole disobeyed a direct order to abandon his vehicle. It doesn't mention that he fought from inside a burning hull at temperatures that should have killed him. It just lists the numbers, cold and clinical, and those numbers put Lafayette Poole's total vehicle kills at 258, which is more than any other tank commander in the history of the United States Army, before or since. Poole is evacuated to a field hospital with severe burns on his hands and arms, shrapnel wounds in his shoulder and leg, and smoke inhalation so bad that he can barely breathe. The doctors tell him he's done. His war is over. But Lafayette Poole has other ideas. While he's recovering in the hospital, he hears that his platoon is back in action, and he starts pestering the doctors to release him. They refuse. So Poole waits until the doctors are gone, puts on his uniform, and walks out of the hospital. He hitches a ride back to the front lines, shows up at his unit's bivouac area, and says, "I need a tank." His commanding officer stares at him, covered in bandages, limping from shrapnel wounds, and says, "Poole, you should be in a hospital." Poole says, "I've been in a hospital. I didn't like it. Give me a tank." They give him a tank. And on September 19th, 1944, Lafayette Poole climbs back into the commander's hatch and rolls forward into Germany. Lafayette Poole's war ended for real on September 19th, 1944, the same day as the burning tank incident. Later that afternoon, after receiving a new tank, Poole was leading a column through Münsterbusch when an 88mm shell hit his Sherman's tracks. Poole and his driver bailed out, but as they ran for cover, they stepped on a German anti-personnel mine. The explosion shredded Poole's left leg. The doctors amputated below the knee. Poole was 25 years old. He'd been in combat for exactly 81 days. And in those 81 days, he destroyed 12 confirmed enemy tanks and 258 armored vehicles, killed over 1,000 German soldiers, and took 250 prisoners. He received the Distinguished Service Cross, the Silver Star, 2 Bronze Stars, and the Purple Heart with oak leaf cluster. He never received the Medal of Honor, which many historians believe was a bureaucratic oversight, a case of the paperwork getting lost in the chaos of the war's final months. After the war, Lafayette Poole returned to Texas. He married, raised a family, and worked as a highway patrolman. He rarely spoke about the war. When reporters asked him about the burning tank incident, he'd shrug and say, "It was my job." Lafayette Poole died on May 30th, 1991, at the age of 71. He's buried in Roselawn Memorial Park in Corpus Christi, Texas, and his grave is marked with a simple headstone that reads, Lafayette G. Poole, Staff Sergeant, U.S. Army, World War II. But tankers remember. They remember because the M4 Sherman on display at the 3rd Armored Division Museum is painted with the words, "In the Mood," on the side. They remember because Lafayette Poole proved something that every tank commander since 1944 has carried with them. That courage isn't about the size of your gun or the thickness of your armor. It's about refusing to quit, even when the tank is burning, even when the enemy outnumbers you, even when every rational part of your brain is screaming at you to bail out. Because sometimes the only difference between winning and losing is one man who decides that 6 hours inside a burning metal box is a fair price to pay for 11 German tanks. And Lafayette Poole paid that price again and again until there was nothing left to give.